Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today we are going to 3D model a pinball machine using a combination of mesh modeling tools we've covered in the past, as well as the volume builder that we just covered. And we are going to animate this, make it look like a cool pixelated thing using the RKT Voxel mesher that Rocket Lasso had worked on. So I'm super excited to try this out and get started. I did a ton of research on pinball machines for this project to the point where I started dreaming of voxels and pinball machines. So I'm super excited to jump into Cinema 4D. You can follow along with me and 3D model as well. You can put together your own mood boards and get creative and make something unique to you. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to show a little bit of what I have going and my process in getting started. Before even I start 3D modeling, there was a lot of thinking and a lot of work that went into this. So I put together mood boards and did some research. I found some images that I just liked the color in it and the playfulness. I felt really inspired by the Hello Kitty game on Switch, Hello Kitty Island Adventure, and I also felt inspired a little bit by Animal Crossing for this pinball machine. And I think the things that I liked between those two games was I like collecting things and games, and I wanted to go with a beach theme. I enjoyed collecting seashells along the beach in both of these games. So really grabbing inspiration from that. I like these retro vibes from this illustration here. I'm not totally sure who made that as an artist, but I found it on Pinterest along with this one, and I thought that they were really inspirational. I liked the colors that these artists had used, and they had done a really nice job. If anyone knows who made these, feel free to call it out in the comments. I'm curious. And it'd be nice to give them some credit for their work. I thought this lamp was really fun, and I like the fantasy of it, of mixing function with fantasy and making it fun. I like the vibrance of it. I felt inspired by collecting things at the beach myself when I go on vacation. I like collecting rocks and seashells and things like that. And that was something that I never really felt like I grew out of. I still enjoy it. I still love it. So I'm grabbing all of this inspiration and really pulling it together into this pinball machine design. I also wanted to do this pixelated kind of retro look with how I render it and animate it. So I was also grabbing inspiration from like older games and that pixelated look, or like those little cubes and squares making up an image. And I wanted to play around with that in Voxels and Rocket Lasso's Voxel mesher tool. So I'm really combining inspiration from all of that together to create something a little bit different and new. So I grabbed these, put them together. I also wanted to just reference the form of existing pinball machines. So I grabbed some images. I felt inspired by this retro Crosley machine and just wanted to pull some images of these. I'll actually also have these displayed on my other screen, as well as a cork board behind the camera that you can't see, so that I have a reference the entire time while working. And if you're doing a similar thing along with me, if you'd like to create your own image boards, make your own stylized pinball machine, and follow along with me, you are welcome to do that. Grab inspiration from your own life, things that you like in games and like doing, and pull some reference images from that inspiration, put them into a mood board like me, and you can 3D model with them, post it on your walls or on a secondary screen as well. I also felt inspired by these old jukebox machines. So I put that in there as a form reference. And then I watched some videos that were really cool on YouTube. I may reference them in the description, but I watched some videos where they explained the technology behind these older pinball machines and how they worked. Some of them were pre-computer, so just relying on mechanisms and things like that. So it was really cool, and I took some screenshots of how they worked, and I felt really inspired by this. There's a pinball machine that I like to play, and I grabbed inspiration from that one down there. And there was someone on YouTube that took slow motion videos of pinball machines, so I also grabbed inspiration from that. So some of the images are from that YouTube channel here. So just learning as much as I can about the history of pinball and how they work and how different machines were throughout history. I feel like I barely scratched the surface of what there is to know about pinball, but it's a good base to 3D model off of. And I'm sure that if I want to 3D model more pinball machines and continue learning about this in the future, I can definitely do that. This was a good starting point, though, for me to build off of. And then I sketched some ideas. There was a part of me that wanted to reference this very classic, iconic design of the pinball machine, but there's a part of me that also doesn't like following the classic old things have always been done, and I want to break things a little bit. So I was thinking, what if I added giant fillets on this and curved it? What if I made it more like the Crosley machine? And then I thought I might be breaking what's expected a little bit too much. I still want this to be iconic, easy for people to recognize. If I change the form language too much of the machine, people might not be able to recognize it fully. So I ended up deciding I wanted to keep the basic form, but I wanted to still do something different and something to make it stand out against other pinball machines, so that if you walk into an arcade, you think, wow, this one's different. I haven't seen this before. I want to see what it's like. So I thought it'd be fun to add this octopus character on top of it, but I'm still keeping the basic form language of what you'd expect when it comes to a pinball machine. Still very classic. And while I was learning about pinball machines, I explored a little bit with sketches of what we could do. We could have bumpers here and maybe put little seashells on them. I wanted to make a sand castle. I felt really inspired by actually the castle from this game, but I want to do a sand castle and stylize it that way. I also saw that there's some games where you can collect letters in the pinball machine, in a sense. Maybe I'm not wording that correct, but you try to hit certain targets to get letters in the game. So I thought, like how you can collect seashells on a beach, you can collect coins. Sometimes people have those metal detectors and they can collect coins. So that would be fun. And then I added in some bumpers just so that you have some more things for the pinballs to bounce off of, which could be fun. And yeah, I kept the design pretty simple. There's a treasure chest down here. The idea is just to give myself something to use as a reference while I'm 3D modeling that I've already given some thought to make it a little bit easier for me. And then I also looked up some Pantone colors that I liked, and I grabbed a lot of inspiration from this first mood board of colors that I thought were playful and fun. I didn't want this pinball machine to be too serious. I didn't want it to look like it was taking itself too seriously. I just wanted to have fun with this project and have it be a learning experience, not only for me, but for all of you. So I'm learning a ton doing this as well, and I think it's really fun when all of you join me on this learning journey and we can try things out, learn, and make mistakes together and learn from them. I think that's more fun. That's just a part of the design process. If you aren't making mistakes in the design process, you aren't learning. And you aren't pushing yourself far enough. So I think it's okay to let yourself make some mistakes, learn from them, move forward, fix it, continue on. So that's what I'm doing here. And this is just a rough baseline to start off with. It might evolve as I work, and that's totally okay. But let's go ahead and get started and jump into Cinema 4D. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D. We talked a little bit how we're going to use the volume builder, we're going to use the mesh tools. I want to start off with just 3D modeling that basic form. So I did some research and looked up the dimensions of a pinball machine, and I had actually downloaded an image with them. So I'll go ahead and grab that from here and open it up for all of you to see. I have this, so it's really helpful. It has the dimensions in there. You can see that's working with centimeters, and that's fine. We even have degrees in here. As you can tell, I got these from dimensions.com. They're not paying me to say that, but I thought it would be helpful for me. You can also 3D model based off of taking dimensions of objects you have at home and things like that. I don't have dimensions of a pinball machine. I guess I could have gone to the arcade and been that weird person with a tape measure and just started measuring it. But I decided to just grab these off the internet and to pay some money for it. So I'm going to be using this as a reference today. And I'm going to show my process of how I'll actually put this on a plane inside of Cinema 4D to use it while I'm 3D modeling. And you can do something similar if you'd like to follow along with me. Or you can just watch and apply this process to anything you're doing. You don't have to make the same exact thing as me. There's room for all of us to be creative together. So I dropped in this plane. I want to just double check my units in here. So right now I'm working in centimeters. It looks like in here, I want to make sure that this also says centimeters. We want the dimensions in our units and our preferences, as well as our dimensions in our scene scale. I open that up with Control D. Command D opens up your scene settings. And under Scene tab, we can look under Scale. And I also have centimeters in there. So that's good. We're all matching up everything. Nice and simple like that. The dimensions of this image, I'm going to scale the frame to match that ratio. It says it's 1500 pixels. So I'm just going to type in 1500 there, and it's 1500 by 875. And I'm just doing that so that the ratio is correct on here, and then I'm going to actually scale this thing in so that it lines up with everything. But I want to make sure that when I put the image on the plane, it's the correct ratio. I'm going to make this 1 segment by 1 segment. And I'll change the orientation until it looks right. Oh, I want this to be 1. Accidentally pressed that button. Okay, so I'll just try that out right now. We have this giant plane. And we're going to need some textures on here. So I'm going to create a material. Yeah, I'll create a standard redshift material. If you're working with a different render, process is the same thing. Basically, we just want to add our dimensions reference into here. So I'm dragging and dropping. So now we got this in here. And now we can apply this to our plane. So I'll drag and drop this on here. I'll name this plane reference. So this will be kind of like my guide for making sure everything lines up. And I'll even name this redshift material reference. And you can tell that it's upside down, so let's try -Z and see if that flips it around. And you can check what increments you're using quantize in by going into here. We've talked about this in the past, and then instead of using your snap, you go into quantize, and you can change your number of rotation for degrees and such while you're using the quantize tool. I'm going to hit the middle mouse button to see all views, and I need to find, let's look at the front view. So I'll hit the middle mouse button again. I'd like to see garage shading, And I just want to line this up with the floor. And I might even put another plane in here as our floor as a reference. So I'll just name that floor. And then I'll move our reference up. So there we go. For our floor, I'm actually going to also add the texture. I'll hit the middle mouse button again to go into this view. And I actually need this to be the same dimensions again so that we have the right ratio. So I'll make this 1500 by 875. And remember, we're going to scale this all in, so no worries. If you're like, this is not the right size, it doesn't need to be, it just needs to be the right ratio. So right now, I'm looking at these and I'm thinking that what would help is adding in a cube. I'm going to make this our bounding box. And then a fun little trick to make this line up with the bottom is I'm going to look under our nodes. And let me see if I can find this in here. So right now we're in the asset browser. You can open it here, click nodes, and look where I'm looking. Let me look this up. Geometry. Axis. There we go. I'm going to put this in here. And you can see, there, it popped to the bottom. It's all nicely lined up. So that's without it, and that's with it. So it just lines up our cube with that bottom surface. So that's really nice. It makes the axis on the bottom so much easier. So we're using this as a bounding box. So it says our overall dimensions are 192. So we need this cube to be 192 in the Y direction. And you can see that our reference images are way too huge. They are ginormous. And that's okay. Oh, it also has inches on here. I guess I could have worked in inches. That's okay. Most countries use centimeters, so I'm going to use centimeters today, even though I'm in the United States. And let's go ahead and take a look at what is our dimension going this way. 130 centimeters. 130 centimeters, there we go. And then this says 72. So these drawings should be to scale. I'm going to go ahead and scale these in to see what it looks like. So T hotkey, I'm just clicking out in the abyss kind of here and dragging in, holding shift. Since we're using this for animation purposes, I feel like it just needs to be close. We're not manufacturing this, so we don't need to worry too much about making things exact. But what is nice about doing it this way is that if we do get it pretty close, our proportions will look right and they'll look accurate in comparison to other pinball machines in life. So that's my goal here. So this is looking okay, and we have this lined up nice and neat. And this is our bounding box. I'm going to right click on this and add on a render tag of display. I'd like to change it to be lines so that we can see through it. This is just a reference for scale. So that's what we're using it for here today. And already looking at this cube, in my mind, I didn't think of the proportions of a pinball machine being this. So it's really helpful to have these dimensions because my memory remembers the pinball machine being a different proportion than what it actually is. So that's why it's always good to double check what you remember in your mind against dimensions in real life. So I have this here, which is pretty nifty. And we're also going to need display tags on our reference. So I don't want this to be lines. I want this to still be quick shading, but the thing that I'll do differently here is I'm going to adjust the visibility. So I can make this, so this way I can adjust the visibility and I can turn it on and off if I want to. I just have that option. And I find that helpful. I'm going to move our reference back a little bit and look at this from the top view. I want to go ahead and snap this. So I have the snap on and I'm going to snap to a polygon. I want to go ahead and snap this right here. Perhaps I'll try an edge snap. So that I can snap to this edge. There we go. See? Edge snap intersection. There we go. Now we know that those are intersecting. We know that our machine should stick within here. And we're going to need a cube in order to start modeling this. And it's okay for this cube to just be 1 by 1 by 1 for our segments in the attributes. I'm going to click the middle mouse button, go on in here. And I'm just going to move this up for right now. I'm also going to add a display on this cube. One other option, if you don't want to control the visibility that way, is you can try turning on X-ray instead of adjusting the visibility in here. And sometimes that works better so that I can make this see-through. You can even change your reference to be in X-ray mode if you find that easier. Right now I like it a little bit more opaque. So for this cube, we're going to need to adjust the dimensions. So I'm just going to pull in the sides. I'm going to get this kind of close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to hit the C hotkey to make this editable. You can also hit this button down here. So now we are good to go. I'm going to use my rectangle selection here so that I can select points. I'm in point mode as I'm working now. And I'm just going to line up these points that I see here. So I'm selecting both of these. I have visible only turned off so that I can select through the object. And I'm just lining up with the general form of this pinball machine. Again, we don't have to have it exact for what we are working on today, but we do need it to be close so that it's believable. And we'll check this from the top view now. You'll notice that we can't see our plane, so I'll need to go ahead and turn on our garage shading. And you'll also notice that we need to move this over. So we need to see this top view here, so I'm going to go back in this mode. I'm going to rotate with the R hotkey. Make sure that we are rotating the floor. About 180 degrees. And then we're just going to move this up. Line it up with the box here, our bounding box. So this is our top view we want to work within. So our cube is going to be lower pinball machine body. And I'm just going to, again, go into point mode, move these points where they need to go. I'm going to grab all of these here and just bring them in to line up with that purple line. I'll grab these points in here, bring them in to line up. And now we know our proportions are good. We have a great start for this. The next step is we are going to build this part with the screen on it. So we're actually going to need another reference for this. So I'm going to just go ahead and click on this. Hit R, hold Control, so we're making a duplicate, and I'm holding Shift so that at the same time as doing that, I'm using Quantize, and I can rotate in increments of 5 degrees, since that's what we have our Quantize set up to. I think that's 90 degrees. No, it's not. Move that around. It's hard for me to see the dimensions sometimes on the screen. It's a little small. So I'm going to go in this view and just see how much I'm lining this up and what I need to do. I think I want to check that this isn't turned a weird amount of degrees. It's 90.4. That's not right. We want this to be 90, just negative 90 degrees. There we go. Okay, so that should be lining up nicely. I'm going to just check the degrees of the other references that I have. It should be 0. It doesn't hurt to double check your work. We have the floor reference. We have the reference for vertical. I'm going to say I'm going to name this floor reference top view. And this reference is going to be and we can even look at it from that point of view. But I think this is pretty close. That's pretty good. And we want our next cube to line up with that first one. So I'll actually just make a duplicate of this box. This lower pinball machine body. I'm just going to make a duplicate of that, and I'm going to name this upper pinball machine body. So now we have both of those going. I'm going to hit the middle mouse button and work in point mode again. I'm going to use my rectangle selection, bring these on in, line them up, bring these here, line them up, bring these here and line them up. Another way you could make sure you're keeping this symmetrical is you could also hit the T hotkey and just scale in one direction. So we know this remains symmetrical. You could also turn on the symmetry up here. Either works. There's always more than one way of working in Cinema 4D. And that's one of the nice things is you can go about this in many different ways and they'll be right. You know, you can do it in multiple ways and it'll still be right. It'll turn out the way you need. So since I have that snap to edge on, I'm actually snapping to my bounding box as I'm moving these in this view, which is helpful. I'm actually going to snap this to the edge on the lower body cube, and I'll move this guy up here. I'll turn off the snap for a moment because I just want to move that up. So you can see we have this very nice basic form for our pinball machine. So that's looking great. We need some legs on this guy here. So we're going to need some edges. And I'm going to build the legs from that. So while 3D modeling, it really helps a lot to keep forms basic at the beginning and add in the details last. So everything that's going on the inside of this pinball machine That's going to be near the end of the process. We start off with the main form first. Similar to the process for sketching, you start off with the main form and add in the details at the end. So we got our legs up next. So let's use ML for loop. Path cut. We'll need to do this in edge mode. So now you can see my edges are highlighted blue. I might look at this from the front to just see how they make these legs in typical thickness, because again, this is all measured out as a drawing. So I'm just going to add in a loop here. It looks like the legs attach there. Looks like the legs attach there. Going to try looking at this from the left view. So we're looking again at where these legs attached, ML. It's a little bit harder to see where I'm adding those edges, but I'm adding it right at that purple line. I'm adding it in there. I'll go back in here. We could even look at this from the top view. Just to see where those edges line up. Sometimes it helps me to look at more than one view at once so that I can visualize it a little bit easier. So that's what I'm doing here. It looks like they're saying that line should go there. So we're just cutting this up to get in the basic dimensions of where everything's going. We can even do this for the upper portion. Go back into this view with the middle mouse button. Add in that guy there. I think it's okay for me to turn off the X-ray mode here for a moment. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I want to display garage shading lines. So now we can see all of our cuts in here and begin extruding things out and building off of that. I'm going to click on polygon mode over here. And I'll start with this lower body here. Click on these two sides. Click on these two. I might hit viewport solo for this part so I can see a little bit easier. Click here, click here. And now I'm going to hit Control C for copy, Command C for Mac. I'll click off of that and hit Control V or Command V for Mac to paste it. I'm working on a PC. Now that we have this in here, I can go ahead and rename this legs. So now we have legs. I'll unsolo this so I can see it again. And I'm going to hide these other parts here so that I can just focus on the legs. I'm going to add in my point selection rectangle and just select these points on the legs. I'm going to need to move these down, line them up. I'm going to need to move these down and line them up. Now we talked a little bit about how we can add generators to the volume builder. So we can work with those even here. I'm going to move this down. going to move this down, something like that. And that's looking pretty close, but that gave us a good start for adding that in. And then from here, I need to make some further adjustments. So the first thing is I want to make sure that there's no angle there. So I'll hit the T button to transform this or scale. I'll hit the Y button and scale this in using quantize, holding shift till this says 0%. And when it's at 0%, we know that is perfectly level. We can do the same thing here. Hit T, hold shift, scale in to 0%. So that is perfectly level, and just have those nicely lined up. Hit the middle mouse button to come back into this view. So it looks like these legs are bent metal sheeting. So that in a way would work very well with the thicken tool. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the legs into the thicken and rename the thicken pinball legs. And of course, we don't need sheet metal this thick. This is quite a lot. I'm just going to increase this a little bit until it looks reasonable. This is also stylized. It's going to look a little bit pixelated as we were talking about. So if we oversize these a little bit, it's not a big deal. So I know like that's a little bit thick, but I think that when we make these voxels later, it'll be really nice. And this is something where, since it is in a generator, it'll be really easy to change in the future if we change our mind. I'm going to use ML to add in the loop cut. And I'm going to just take in these points over here, bring them on in. There we go. We're getting some nice pinball machine legs. Actually, I want to add in that loop cut here first before I do that. So I hit undo. Because I want it to bend here, but I don't want it to bend down there. I want the bend to stop lower. So I'm moving this guy in here. But what I want to do to remain having that flexibility is I want to add in bevels using the bevel deformer. So we're just going to drop this guy in here. And you can already see this is beginning to bevel. Now I want this to have more subdivision, so I'm going to increase this here. And I'm going to decrease the size of that bevel, because we don't want sharp edges on this machine. Those won't be nice. So I'm going to unhide this here. And I'd like to also add bevels on here. So I might hold Control and just duplicate that and put it on here. So now you can see that we just kind of copied and pasted those bevels onto this machine, and it's looking nice. So I'm going to do that again to the upper pinball machine body and unhide that. So there we go. We got bevels going on everything. Now usually for sheet metal like this, there would be some kind of part coming out at the bottom that's welded, and then maybe they put a weld nut on the inside of this so that the leveler feet can twist into some threads. So we're missing that part actually on our feet, so I'm just going to turn off the thicken here for a moment. I'm going to grab this edge, if I can, with the selection brush. And since I like cutting down my time working, I'm just going to hold Control and drag this guy out. I want it to be close to this edge here. So you can see we have some crazy polygons happening. And that's to be expected now. So you might be wondering, how do we fix this? Oh no. Well, first of all, let's start with hidden undo. Nothing to panic about. We're going to use ML. And I just like to add in a cut, like about there. Because we don't really need this to go all the way up to that corner. What's giving us trouble is this edge here when it's beveling. So we just want to leave a little bit of space there. I'm just going to do that again. And turn this on. And you can see that looks better. It does look better. It's not perfect by any means. Something that we may want to do is use a selection to control what we're actually beveling, because it's trying to bevel this area in here, and I don't really want that beveled, and it looks weird. But for right now, I'm going to use UL and just select this edge here. UL. So now I got that selected. Also select that. I'm going to use the E hotkey to move this in. I need to find that arrow. Where's our arrow? There we go. Okay, I just wanna move this guy in a little bit. Because our bevel isn't huge. We can work with this, and that's the main point. So I'm going to hide that thickened legs, and in all honesty, we can just work on the legs on half of this and then mirror them to the other side. So I think that'll save us some time once we fix these bevels, and we don't have to do the whole thing on the other side of this unit, which will be nice. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just do that preemptively and delete the legs on the other side. So, you know, as you're 3D modeling, sometimes you think of quicker, easier ways to do things, and that's totally okay. That's a part of the process. So we have this going on here. I need to create a selection. So what I need to do is select the edges that I actually want beveled. So I want that edge beveled. I want that edge beveled. I'm going to move up. This edge I'd like beveled. Those are the only edges I want beveled, so I'm going to go into our select menu, choose store selection, and I'm going to turn back on the thicken. And what I want to do is click on the bevel and drag our edge selection into here where it says selection, and then we're only beveling those areas that we want to, and we can adjust this further. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the work plane so I can see a little bit easier what's happening here. Something else that might help is actually within our thicken, we're going to adjust the position. So that's looking better. I'm going to hit Q again. I'm just going to hit this button here to use the coordinate system. And select these and just move them down a little bit. Going to use MK to make a cut here. Hit escape. I want to delete this polygon here. And now that looks nice and clean. So you saw how I fixed that. That's what I'm talking about. Like, we're all here learning and making things look nice and neat. And it's a little bit of a process sometimes, but I think it's important to show that part of the process while I'm working because that is reality. There's no one who 3D models and doesn't have to fix a thing. You know, that's a part of the process, and that's why it helps to have experience doing that stuff. So now that I know how to solve this on one leg, I can do that on the other. Since this will be very stylized, I think it's okay to just use something like a hemisphere for the feet here. I'm going to need to make this quite a bit smaller. There we go. Let's shrink this guy down. You could just use some simple primitives for the feet, in all honesty. No one's going to look at this up close, and if this were something that were going to be manufactured, we could really do that kind of detail. But for this kind of scenario, it would really just be a waste of time. So you need to consider what you're 3D modeling for and what is needed for it and work accordingly. So this will be perfect for some nice little leveler feet. Just scale that in there. And then the other thing that I'd like to check is, it's hard for me to see right now. Is this open on the bottom? I believe it is. So this is something that we can go ahead and close. If we'd like to, we can make it editable using C and use MD, which is close polygon hole, that tool. I like to use the grid sometimes. And then I'll just fill that in. And now we have a nice little foot here. It's not totally level with the floor, so I am going to move this guy up. Okay. And then I'm going to scale him in. And if we want them to be wider, more than vertical, we can use this scale to scale them out one direction, but not vertically. So there we go, we got a leg. And we're going to add the leg over to the other side. So Control, Shift, and drag that on over. Now we have 2 feet. Let's go ahead and work on this guy here. So there we go. That looks better. I like this. Looks like some nice bent metal. Okay, and now we got to mirror these guys. So let's go ahead and grab a symmetry. So we're going to grab a symmetry. We're going to put this in here. And we're going to need to move the axis of our symmetry over. So I hit this button here to go into Enable Axis. So now when I move this using the E hotkey, what I'm actually moving in this mode is the axis that this is being rotated around, but you'll see that we need to adjust what we are doing the symmetry around. So we're doing it around the Z, and then once you do that, you can move this to get it centered. You could even snap it to the axis of this object using your snap if you'd like to get things super exact, and then you'll know that's perfectly centered. This is looking pretty good. And if we'd like to use the symmetry on both this and the feet, what I think I'll do is just connect all of these into an object. So I'm going to right click on this, hit connect objects, and it made a new one. I'm going to delete the old ones. And what that does is it just takes those two meshes and makes them into one. So now this is feet. And I'll put this in here. Now we want both of these to be in a null. So I'll use the hotkey Alt-G. I believe that's Option G on Mac. And then that way we'll have this group and everything in here is going to go along that symmetry line and copy itself. So we're going to name this symmetry group legs. So now we have everything nice and neat. I'll rename the symmetry legs. And I think that's basically what we need to use the symmetry for. If we're worried about this being symmetrical, you can use the hotkey MH. Just make sure that you have your symmetry direction set up. I believe that's H. Yeah, and then that's symmetrize. And you can check out your symmetry settings in here. So just make sure you are mirroring across the correct area, or else you'll end up with something a little weird looking. So then that's how you can symmetrize this stuff to make sure that everything's symmetrical. Because it's easy to start off with something symmetrical and then halfway through the modeling process realize that it's not and have to fix it. So that's how you fix it. So I did that for the top and the bottom. So these are all symmetrical now, just in case. If they weren't before, now they are. So it's very interesting. As I'm looking at these, it looks like there are two nuts that go right here to hold the legs in place typically. This whole model will be voxelized, so I don't think that these need to be very detailed. We could again use the half sphere for that. But I want to focus on the bigger shapes first, so I'll probably start off with just dropping this in. So what I need to do is turn off enable axis. I'm going to work on those parts and this up here. So all of this we need to extrude down, and the hotkey for the extrude is MT. So I'm just going to move this down. Oh, whoops, wrong way. There we go. And I'm going to look at it from this view. So we'll need to turn on our X-ray again so that I can line it up with this slope here. So we got this here. We're going to grab our points once again. I'll probably use the rectangle selection because I find that's easiest, and I'm just gonna move these guys on down to line up with this line, reference line. And then it's important to me that this is vertical, so I'm just going to scale this in the X direction to 0% to make sure that's vertical. And I'll do the same thing up here. Because although this whole thing is sloped one way, I feel like this part should be vertical. Okay. So there we go. We've got our 6.5 degree slope, and that's looking good. And if we want to just double check that these are really nice and smoothed out, these points, we could even use the iron on them. But that might also bring them in a little bit, so it might smooth them out in both directions, whereas we would only want to smooth them out in one. We could also use the flatten tool. We haven't used that for a while. That's under the mesh menu. You could use flatten. Just to flatten things out. So there we go. Now we know this is a flat surface. We used our flatten tool on it. I almost forgot that was an option. I did a whole video on that a long time ago. We need to work on this area. So I'm going to click on the upper pinball machine body, and we're going to use MT again, because we need to extrude this back. Now you'll notice that we're having some complications here on the bottom. I'm actually going to solo this using this button so it's a little easier to work on this part. And if we look at our reference, we can kind of see what's happening here. So I'm still happy with how I moved this back. That's not an issue to me. What's an issue to me are these two polygons, 1 and 2. So those are an issue to me. And this one's an issue, and this one's an issue. So I'm going to delete those. Now the really cool thing that we can do now is we can either bridge this, so we could bridge together these two edges, and I might go ahead and do that in edge mode. We can bridge these together, and then we can close those polygon holes. So the hotkey for bridge is MB. So there we go, we got our bridge. We're just gonna connect these two edges, and then we're going to use our close polygon hole tool, which is MD. By the way, I've covered all the mesh modeling tools, so if any of these you want a deep dive explanation of, I've done all of that, so you can check those out if you'd like to. So now we got that in there. And you'll notice that this doesn't look very flat, so if we're feeling fancy, we could use our flatten tool on these bottom polygons. Another option is we could just grab the points, use the T hotkey for scale or transform. I want to make sure that I'm not selecting more than what I meant to, which I did, so I'm going to deselect these guys in the back. Use T, and then these should scale down to be 0%, which is also completely flat. Sometimes I'll do that instead of grabbing the flatten tool. I want to look at this from the side. I'd like to angle these, so I'm just going to rotate. And I may even rotate in this view to just see how we're lining this up. Now, this whole thing is going to be voxelized in a volume builder. So I'm not too worried about things being perfect at this stage. But you can see that looks a lot better. It just does. And there's more that I want to do with this. I want to adjust the edges further. So I'm going to use ML, because as I'm looking at my reference, there's this little edge here. And this area here comes out a little bit. So I want to replicate that here. I'm going to use MT just to have that area come out. It looks pretty nice. Okay, so the other thing that I'm seeing here is that I want this all to be a little bit more level again. So this time I'm going to use UN, and I'll show you what that is. That's the Fong break selection. There's a whole other video on that. And that'll just let me select flat areas, like this area here, with a certain tolerance. And then I can have this line up a little bit better with this slope here so that there's less intersections happening, at least visually. I want to stylize this part a little bit more, have it a little bit more obvious what we're doing. I'm going to use MW for the inset here. And right now, I'm not going exactly based off of my reference, but I just feel like this will look nice if I set this back a little bit. So I'm going to do that. Might do a smaller inset. Then move this back, because we're going to be relying quite a good amount on geometry. I might use the coordinate system to just have it go back a little bit straighter. So I think that looks nice. And this looks good enough to put in a volume builder at this point. The proportions look good, the legs look good. I'm happy with this. I'm just going to organize things a little bit. I don't feel like we need our references anymore, but I'll keep them in our scene just in case. So I'm going to group all of these together using Alt-G. That's Option G on Mac, I believe. And we'll name this group References, just so that we have that going on in here. Okie dokie. And we really need all of these to go in a volume builder. And now it looks nice and pixelated. We can have a smaller voxel size on that. That's pretty big. Let's try 5. Do I like that? Do I not like this? I don't know. I'm going to go under my extensions, and everyone might not have this. You need to purchase this from Rocket Lasso if you'd like to have it, but it's the RKT Voxel mesher, and it's going to turn our voxels into meshes. So now it looks cool and pixelated. I like that. You'll see that it's having a little bit of trouble with this guy here. So that could be partially because they're so thin. So there's a few different ways we could probably problem solve that. We could make our voxels even smaller. So maybe we'll try 2. Oh, there we go. We got legs kind of appearing. That's the tricky thing about this. And that's why I also wanted to leave this very open to changes, you could say. So that if I want to go back in here and add in some thickness, just so that those appear, I can do that. Like now you can see those legs are appearing more. I don't know if I like them that thick though. That looks kind of funny to me. What's a nice happy medium for us today? Oh wow, and then we have this cool step formation in here. So something else that we might want to think about is if we just want to rotate our entire voxel grid, which is also very possible. We talked a little bit about that in the volume builder episode, and we may want to do that. So many decisions. Okay, I'm gonna try it. We're gonna add in this null, and I'm going to name it Voxel Grid Control, because if you remember, we're going for this heavily stylized pixelated cube look from our image boards. So I feel really inspired by this look here. So this is what we're going for. This pixelated kind of cube look with these bright colors. We even have some colors picked out, some Pantone colors. So I think maybe I'll go ahead and be a little bit experimental in here. I'm going to drop this null into the override grid matrix. And that's within our volume builder. So this is volume builder object override grid matrix. And now we can rotate our entire creation grid within for our volume builder. So I'm going to rotate this guy, making sure I have my null selected. Oh, you know what? We have the number of degrees on here. We want this 6.5 degrees, I think. Negative 6.5. Oh, thank goodness. That looks so much better. Our legs look a little weird now. We have options on how we could approach the legs. We could put them in two separate volume builders with two separate voxel grids. I don't know if I want to do that. See, I said we'd be problem solving while modeling this. There's nothing that I've ever 3D modeled in my life where I haven't had to problem solve. There's a part of me that feels like maybe this step formation is adding to that interesting pixelated look, and we could embrace it. We could embrace this thing. It's not horrible. I'm going to try just moving our voxel grid over to see what that does. Oh, that's a different look. Haha. You know what? I'm going to embrace this. We're going with the pixelated look. I like it. It's good. We're going to colorize this later anyways. So before this video gets too long, I think I'm going to break this up into separate parts. So this is our current stage we're in now. And if you'd like to continue 3D modeling with me, you can check out the next episode. And I really hope to see you there. We're having so much fun. At least I'm having fun. I hope all of you are having fun too, because 3D modeling should be fun. And yeah, I'm so excited about this project. So I'm really happy to be doing it with all of you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Give me a thumbs up, please. Please hit subscribe and ring the bell if you'd like to be notified when the next episode comes out. And yeah, leave any comments, any thoughts on this project or the workflow in the comments below. Tell me about your 3D modeling experience or what kinds of cool things you're working on. I'd love to hear about it. If you're going to make a pinball machine like me, I'd love to see it. Let me know what you're working on, what the theme is, if you made a mood board. And yeah, I hope to see you on the next episode here on Ambient 3D Animations. We'll continue working on this together.